Oh, hi everybody. It's great to be with you today, and thanks for making the time to join us. Presentation is going to last sort of 20-25 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions afterwards, focusing on this area of rebate management and control. Just a little bit about Segura. We were formed in 2011. We took about 2.5 years to build the products that we'll discuss in a little detail later, and have been really an active business in this marketplace for the past 2 years. In that time we've managed to acquire 12 high street retailers onto our system. By the end of this year we should have the large majority of the top 30 retailers in the country using our platform. Our vision is to enable brands and consumers to know the source and journey of every component of every product in real time. And what this means is essentially that any product that you have that ends up in your store, you will know which manufacturer has produced every item that goes into that product, from the buttons and zips to labels and thread. It's also our vision to encourage brands and retailers to share this information with consumers to prove their high ethical standards. So for most of our customers, we start by mapping the layers of their supply chain. Then we turn on real-time ordering throughout the chain, and this gives our customers complete visibility of what's happening to every part of their supply chain in real time. And the effect of this is that it helps improve quality and compliance, helps with risk management in the sense of reduces the risks of components and items being made in places that you don't want in your supply chain. So unauthorized suppliers that may have children or slaves in their factories, or may not meet health and safety standards, those types of things. We can help eradicate those from your supply chain. That also helps your brand protection and regulatory compliance. So before we can talk about maximizing rebate collection, we need to define what rebate is for the purpose of this presentation. We're not talking about performance rebates that you'd find in the large food retailers with their primary suppliers, although we can help monitor that type of thing. But what we're talking about today is the component level rebate that might be levied on packaging, hangers and trims by retailers. Now this kind of rebate's been around for a few decades, and in the past it's been used to align brand and supplier incentives and to help fund new product development. And it still exists now in quite a number of high street retailers. And today we're going to talk about how you can maximize that, but for those of you that don't actually have rebate in your supply chain at the moment, it will give you an idea about how you may want to introduce it and what it could be used for. So how it works is essentially brand and packaging and trim supplier agree a sell price for their items which are to be sold into the manufacturers. So this is often with a volume commitment. So if you take an area like Bangladesh, a large retailer may say that to a care label supplier, we want you as our nominated supplier in Bangladesh, and we expect you to receive orders for 100 million care labels a year in that location. They'll often agree a price. That price might be £10 per thousand, but the retailer will say to that label manufacturer, we don't want you to sell those at £10 a thousand, sell them into our suppliers at £14 per thousand for argument's sake, and that extra £4 per thousand, please send that back to us as a rebate once you've collected from the garment manufacturer. The brand stipulates that label manufacturer can be the only nominated supplier, and the supplier then pays that rebate back. So now it's clear what we're talking about today. What's the problem that exists? Well, in our experience, compliance with nominated supplier policy is far worse than most brands are aware of. So this is how it works in its most basic fashion. You can see the brand there at the top, manufacturers, and then nominated suppliers of hangers, buttons and zips there we've represented in this image. So the brand places its purchase order for garments to their garment manufacturer, and then those manufacturers break those down into its component parts and theoretically place sales orders with their packaging or component suppliers through a multitude of ordering systems. So that can be from online portals to fax and phone, but really because of this multitude of orders, it's really difficult to track what's going on. It's also quite likely that the garment manufacturer can find similar components from alternative suppliers, perhaps with lower quality, but not always these days, or produce with poor ethical standards. But the crucial thing is that they get them at a better price, so they can improve their margins. Or they order one batch from your nominated supplier and then the rest are copied at an unauthorized supplier. Needless to say, the volume of components, that volume of components not being produced at your nominated suppliers gets no rebate whatsoever. And you as the brand are very unlikely to spot that in the finished goods, at least until quality problems start rolling in, or the worst case, which has happened to some retailers in the past, where your brand components are discovered in a sweatshop you knew nothing about. And when your rebate statements come from your nominated suppliers sometime later, you can see the volumes don't tally with the volume of finished goods actually ordered and produced. But when you have hundreds or even thousands of manufacturers operating in this way, it's almost impossible for you to manually unpick what is going on without an army of auditors. And a couple of other secondary problems we often see, because you've not ordered the volumes you were supposed to from your nominated suppliers, volume price breaks are not often met, increasing overall costs. In addition, because the rebate statements are largely trust-based reporting, some suppliers will underreport rebate, so you collect even less. It's important to note, clearly many manufacturers and suppliers don't do this and operate entirely ethically and within your sourcing policies. But in our experience, the reality is pretty bad, and sometimes up to 85% of rebatable components are not ordered from the correct suppliers. So in summary, as I've just said, 85% of components are not ordered from authorized suppliers. Number of factories and multiple ordering systems make it really almost impossible to monitor and reconcile the rebate that's due. And some component suppliers will underreport rebate entitlement. So actual rebate becomes a fraction of what it should be. So how can you improve this situation and then collect the maximum rebate due? Well, you can't improve what you can't measure. So here are some requirements of any system that you would look to introduce. It needs to be able to track all the downstream packaging and trims orders created by manufacturers for each purchase order a brand places. It needs to ensure that those orders only go to nominated suppliers. So it needs to lock down a component level on a component level basis where everything comes from. And then it needs to monitor to ensure that if your garments are supposed to have 12 or 15 components in each garment, that the ratio of garments to components ordered do match that. And you need to have a real-time review of order volumes with each packaging and trim supplier, and therefore rebate entitlement. So if you know who's produced what and when, and you know the rebate due on those items, it's an easy calculation, and you're able to invoice for that rebate that's due. And then also have a heat map of manufacturers who are out of compliance with your sourcing policy. So if you're talking about an area where you've got a garment that should have 15 components, and that garment manufacturer, you know you've had your finished goods back to your distribution centres, but on the system they've only had 5 components from authorised suppliers when they should have had 15, that would flag up on a map to show you that those that particular supplier is out of kilter with what your wishes are. And the way we've met these requirements is to provide a hub through which all orders are transacted. So the brand places the purchase order in the normal way through their ERP system, and Segura ingests that purchase order. That purchase order is then presented to the manufacturer. Because Segura also holds a product catalogue, it's broken down into a bill of materials, making it easy for the manufacturer to create a series of sales orders. Segura knows if a component has one or more nominated suppliers, so can ensure that the right suppliers get the sales orders. Suppliers are presented the sales order in the Segura portal, as you can see at the bottom there. In this way, unapproved suppliers are completely locked out of the process. It's worth noting that a brand can allow manufacturers to invite suppliers into the system, usually for non-rebatable items, so they can accept orders, but a brand can require that they approve the supplier first for compliance purposes. But best of all, the brand gets a clear, real-time view of manufacturer compliance with nominated supplier policy over specific time periods, and with the ability to drill down into individual line items on individual purchase orders, all through a single portal. The brand can also see the precise rebate entitlement for each nominated supplier. Now you have all this visibility and control. What are the benefits? Well, your rebate increases a lot, up to a 5-fold increase in rebate collection, and that is a real figure for one of our customers. These are not made-up assumptions, that is real. Your supplier data is contained within the system and is held in real time, so you have real-time access to it. You don't have to spend hours each day checking up on your suppliers, because the system will alert you to any potential problems. So it's management by exception, rather than having to be on the back of everybody, which is a mammoth task. And you can see in a fully configurable dashboard all the data on your suppliers. This can contain whether they deliver to the right quality in a timely fashion and whether they are complying with your component sourcing policies. In most cases, Segura can be implemented inside a month, and within 90 days post-implementation you'll see tangible results. In fact, everyone who has started with Segura is still on the system. We have an enviable 100% customer retention rate, and in today's economy nobody keeps a system that's not delivering results. But the benefits aren't just for the brand or the retailer. The supply chain benefits as well. So for the manufacturer, if you imagine their situation without Segura in place, the retailer will place an order with them, and then they will get an order for 1,000 shirts, and they might then have to go on 12 different systems to order the 12 components that may go into that shirt. And that, as we've said before, can be a fax, it can be an email, it can be a telephone call. And monitoring and tracking those are very difficult. There's no audit trail. With Segura in place, they get their order for their 1,000 shirts, and they go into Segura and order all of those components in one place. And they also know when their component manufacturer has accepted the order, when the order is in production, when the order has been dispatched, and when the order has been delivered. So they have control over that process themselves. The built-in product catalogue reduces error rates. Essentially, against each garment there are a list of approved components, and therefore if the components are ordered out of that catalogue, there's much less likely for the garment manufacturer to order the wrong components by accident. Ability to consolidate orders for bulk buying. This is one of the major benefits that we see from the manufacturers using our system today. Essentially, where you get most orders from retailers come in dribs and drabs over a period of a few days. What this allows the manufacturer to do is, where they've got common components on all of their orders, like a swing ticket, for example, they're able to save their orders over the period of a few days, consolidate them, and then make an order to the swing ticket supplier for a bulk item once they know they've hit a price break. So it enables them to take some cost out of the ordering process. And benefits for the component supplier, well, there's an increase in business immediately for no effort. If you can imagine, if we cut out all of those unauthorized suppliers, of which we've said can be up to 85% of some retailer supply chains, you can end up in a situation whereby the component supplier for swing tickets, care labels, whatever it might be, will see their business volumes go up, 2, 3, 4, 5-fold with no extra effort on their part other than accepting orders through our system. It makes their ordering process again much more simple with manufacturers because we've got integrated approval cycles for complicated items like care labels. It means that the garment manufacturer has the ability to ask for an approval of an artwork for a care label to make sure that it matches their requirements before the care label goes into production, and that reduces errors between garment manufacturers and care label providers, and gives an audit trail so we know who's ordered what and when from whom, so there are no arguments later on if the care labels turn up and are not correct. And then a huge reduction in time tracking and reporting rebate, because we essentially are monitoring that all in real time, so you're not waiting 6 months to be able to send your invoice for rebate. You can do that on a monthly basis. We've just put a quick case study together on one of our customers so that you can get an idea about how it works in reality. This particular department store has put nearly 90% of their supply chain onto our platform. And when they started with us, we realized that essentially many factories, garment manufacturers, were ordering less than 20% of their components from approved suppliers. An anecdote of this actually is one factory in Bangladesh which was ordering much less than that. I think they ordered over the previous year with one of our packaging companies that are on the system about 1,800 units of a particular label, and within a few weeks of having the system set up and authorized for them, their first order was for 380,000 units. So that particular label manufacturer was delighted to have us on board. And this resulted in improved compliance and led to an additional 3.62 million of identified rebate entitlement that they were previously missing out on. And yes, there was a bit of initial skepticism from some garment manufacturers, essentially because that what we tend to find is that those manufacturers that don't want to adopt the system, given all the benefits that the system brings, are usually the ones that are ordering most of their stuff from unauthorized suppliers, and realize that, that bringing the system in place will stop them from doing that. But what they realize very quickly is actually they can save quite a lot of money by consolidating orders and bulk buying. And instead of having to order components from 12 to different 15 sources, they did it in one place. And then one label manufacturer confirmed to us that their total business in a particular area has doubled since Segura's implementation. That is their total business in that location, and over 50% of it, 50% of their business now comes from this one department store, due to the implementation of our system. So what do we want you to remember from this webinar? Well, you're most likely to be missing out on rebate collection, which could amount to millions. Technologies do exist to ensure that nominated supplier compliance is kept, and therefore can help you maximize your rebate. There are knock-on benefits for product quality and regulatory compliance. We can help with that brand protection, keep you out of the press for bad things, and we can help you uncover the problems within 90 days. it is as quick as that. So thank you so much for listening. We now have time for some questions.
Brilliant, thanks Peter. We do have some questions here for you, so let's get started. What happens if a manufacturer chooses not to use the system?
Yeah, it's a good question. Essentially, a manufacturer within our system can still choose to go outside and use an unauthorized supplier. So we can't stop them doing that. We don't physically have people on the ground all over the world that are looking over their shoulder and making sure they don't do that. But what they can't do is they can't do that without the brand or the retailer's knowledge. So the system will immediately flag up to our customer to say that that particular manufacturer has had an order for 1,000 shirts, as we've mentioned, but they've not ordered any care labels from your nominated suppliers. And if they've not done that, we know that that has a 1-to-1 ratio. You can't produce a shirt without putting a care label on it and sell it anywhere in the world. So we can essentially flag that up to the retailer, which allows them to deal with it. So it's what I was talking about with management by exception.
Yeah.
You know, if people are doing what they should be doing, then there's no alerting, and the system will just monitor them on a real-time basis. But if they do something they shouldn't, then the retailer will get notified immediately, and then they're able to deal with that manufacturer in whatever way they wish.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, here's another one then. We have thousands of factories in our supply chain. Does your system work at very large scale?
Marvelous. Yeah, our system is cloud hosted, but it doesn't have to be. But we find the benefits of cloud hosting is obviously it can be accessed very quickly by anybody over the world, anywhere in the world. With the partner that we use for our hosting, the system is pretty much infinitely scalable. So if you imagine at the moment by the end of this year we will have over 30,000 manufacturing sites on the system, probably somewhere close to 150,000 users at that point. And you know, we could increase that 100-fold before we'd even need to think about extending our architecture. So yes, it does work very quickly everywhere in the world, and it works on very low bandwidth as well. So we have done some testing. So if you've got sites out there that have very slow internet connections, that doesn't matter. The system is built to be functional. It's still quite pretty, but it's you know, there's no complicated architecture in there that's going to cause it to be very slow. So essentially it will run very quickly off a very low internet connection anywhere in the world.
Great. Okay, you've mentioned other benefits, so can you tell us what they are?
Yes, I think we've talked about rebate collection, and often for our customers that's a key driver, because that gives you an immediate return on investment. And for some customers that haven't used rebate, they've opted to introduce some rebate in order to cover the cost of the system and some of the product development that they're working on. So that is quite a major part of what we do. But we're also about giving that visibility and transparency and control back to the retailer. So essentially what we think about is it's all the benefits that you have for sole supply, but without any of the drawbacks. So you have competition within your supply chain by having thousands of suppliers, but you have the visibility as if you were only using one, because the system is monitoring that. And that gives huge benefits from a control perspective and visibility perspective. It also gives huge benefits from a quality perspective, because what we often find is when we talk to retailers that don't have a system like ours, is they often will, when we say who are your best suppliers, and who are your best performing suppliers, and they will often say, well, it's that factory in India, or this particular factory somewhere else. And we say, how do you know? And what they find very difficult is to find empirical information and data that proves that that is actually a good factory. And what they get with Segura is actually all of that real-time data about who delivers on time, whether they have regular quality issues, so consignments come in that are rejected, those types of things. You have that data at your fingertips all the time, and it's recording that data and that audit trail all of the time for you. So you have all of that control at your fingertips. The other major thing is it just cuts down on things like errors for air freight and that type of thing. One of our clients in a period a few years ago when we were doing an initial assessment with them suffered in one quarter a £350,000 air freight bill in total, and that was all due to manufacturers saying that components had been delivered late, or there was some other issue that caused them to miss their cut date, in which case they had to put the date back a few weeks or a few days, which meant they missed their shipping date. And the only way that those components those garments could get back to the UK on time into the store was to air freight them and pay the cost of doing that. But when the retailer in question did an investigation into it, they found that 90% of those supposed issues were actually made up, and that in actual fact components had been delivered on time and things had gone the right way. It's just the manufacturer got a better offer for their production slot, so found an excuse to bump them. Well, with Segura in place, they just don't have that option. They can't use the excuse that it's somebody else's fault, because you will know at the touch of a button whether those labels or other items are being delivered to the factory. And it also integrates with DHL and the major courier firms, so that we can also tell you who signed for it and what day it arrived and the time it arrived, which allows you then to go back to the manufacturer and say, actually, I don't think you're quite right. You may just want to have a look in your factory, and so signed for it 3 days ago. So it just cuts that out as well.
Yeah.
And that can be, for the larger retailers out there, can be massive savings.
That's great. Okay, moving on. Another question. We only have nominated suppliers for certain products. Do you also track packaging and trims without rebate?
Yes, absolutely. So there are a range of retailers out there. So most of the retailers that we work with at the moment nominate their first and second tier suppliers, so they're garment manufacturers and then the components like buttons and zips, etc. There are a number of retailers out there that have allow some flexibility with the garment manufacturer to order components from where they like. So they may have a nominated or preferred supplier, but they don't lock that bit down. And one of the first things that we do with them is to work out on an interactive map using the system, is to map out their first and second tier, so that they know who is in that supply chain. What we then can do is, using data that we have and data from external sources, work out for them whether any of those suppliers that they didn't know about are high risk and may cause them a particular problem. And once they've done some triaging and they're able then to lock down that supply chain and go to a fully nominated supply chain, then they can turn on our order function and be able to monitor and control things in real time like our other customers. So it's a slightly longer process for those type of retailers than it is for the ones that have a fully nominated supply chain, but it does get them to that point very quickly. And yes, on the system we have thousands and thousands of different product categories, a lot of which don't carry rebate at all, and that they are still monitored and controlled in the same way. Because yes, there's a financial reason for wanting to control the items that have rebate on. And to be fair, the items that have rebate on are usually the ones that have the brand's name on. So it's a good way of controlling those items, because those are the ones that give you the highest reputational risk. If you've got a label being produced with your name on in a factory by 9-year-olds, then you've got a big problem. Yeah. So those are the ones that tend to carry rebate, but there are a whole host of generic products that you wouldn't know necessarily where they've come from, things like buttons without brands on and thread, and generic hangers, those type of things, polythene bags, you may not have any idea in terms of no branding on, but you still want to know that they've come from your nominated sources, and you know, you may have no rebate on them.
Yeah.
But you need to be sure that you can't get caught out by you know, a reporter entering those factories and seeing that an invoice is going to one of your garment suppliers for your eventual use.
Definitely, that's front page news, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, I hope that's helped. Now this is a good one. Can I really set this up for free? The question on most people's lips, I should imagine.
Yes, absolutely. So we currently offer all our customers a free 90-day trial. You know, we've been around now for a couple of years, and we have some very good case studies and reference points for people to check out. But you know, we're still a young company and recognise that a lot of people will say it's too good to be true. So you know, challenge us on that one. And as I said, everybody that's taken up that challenge has kept the system.
Good.
Because we can deliver results so quickly, and it's fairly obvious within those 90 days what value we add. And so yes, absolutely, you can have it for free. So there are no setup fees, no charges or anything like that. We work with you and your teams to ensure that we get the data required to set the system up in the right way for you. And we run that trial for the 90-day period with agreed success criteria. And at the end of it, if we've achieved everything that you wanted it to achieve, you can carry on and we do a full deployment. If it's not, we shake hands and part company friends. That's it.
Yeah, that's excellent. Okay, so how long does it take to actually set up?
What we find is it usually takes anywhere between 3 weeks and 3 months, depending on access to data from the retailer. So it's very rare that any delay will be caused by Segura and the development team here. Essentially, the platform itself is modular, so we configure it rather than customize it. It's been built in such a flexible way that we don't need to, if you've got a specific requirement, we don't need to put a load of developers on working on building a new part of the system for you. Essentially, we've covered the vast majority of things, can just configure the system to your requirements, and that configuration takes us a couple of weeks. The issue normally is getting the data out of the retailer's ERP system or finance platform, so that we can ingest those purchase orders. And then the other bit of data, which is quite important, is getting the product data set up in there as well, and make sure it's set up in the right way and functioning. And again, we rely quite heavily on the retailer and sometimes parts of their own component suppliers to provide us with that data. And sometimes that can take a bit of time, but in the vast majority of cases we nailed that within 6 weeks.
That's pretty good going, isn't it? Okay, so if somebody...
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, the reason implementation is so quick is that it doesn't have to be hosted in your own data centers and integrated with your own IT departments. It very much sits and stands alone in the cloud. Yes, it does take a data feed from the ERP system, but it doesn't require any installation or anything complicated like that.
So you don't need to get your IT guys involved with that then?
No need to get them involved at all from that point of view, and there's no need to buy any hardware or infrastructure like that either. Because of the joys of hosting in the cloud, that's all provided for you, and the system is then rented rather than purchased. So it's paid for after the 90-day free trial at a fixed monthly cost. So it's easy to budget for as well.
That's pretty good. Okay, another question for you then. We're a heavily copied brand. Can you stop our manufacturers over-ordering for unauthorised overmakes?
Yeah, that's that is an interesting one. We've worked with a number of brands, and this has cropped up several times, and essentially their worry is that some of their own garment manufacturers are actually overmaking their products. And what they do is they order in all of the authorized components, and they may have an order from that brand for 500 luxury shirts, but they make 1,000 of them, and that extra 500 will find themselves on a bazaar somewhere, selling off at a fraction of the price, and essentially they become unlicensed goods. So they are the same as the real product, but they haven't been licensed by the brand in question. And one of the ways that our system can help combat that is by locking down and stopping the garment manufacturers ordering authorized components at that level. Now that's not going to stop them going off to unauthorized places and getting unauthorized components, but then there'll be obvious quality issues and things like that. But it will stop them over-ordering through the approved supply chain. And so it just makes life a bit more difficult for them. And as with any system, there are ways and means of being able to get around it by somebody that is really unscrupulous. The issue with our system is we just make that exceptionally difficult and expensive for them that there becomes almost no point in doing it.
Yeah. Good idea. Excellent. Okay. So I think we've got time for just one more question. So here's a fairly straightforward one, to be honest. Why wouldn't a manufacturer not want to use your system?
Good question. Yeah, there's only really one reason why a manufacturer wouldn't want to use our system, because as we've seen through the presentation, we bring them so many benefits that if they are playing with a straight bat, there is no reason why they would ever want to not adopt our system.
Yeah.
It just makes their life so much easier. The reason that we found that people will push back and manufacturers push back is that they are essentially ordering components from places they shouldn't do. And obviously if they have to order components from the authorized supply chain, then they can see on occasions that might threaten their margin that they've been able to increase by using unauthorized components. So we've seen that, and it does require that the retailer or the brand to put pressure on them to use the system. And all of our retailers essentially change the contract with them to include a clause that they must use the system for purchasing components. And that generally helps it. Yeah, I mean, if we take the particular department store in question out of there was well over 1,000 manufacturers that went onto our system. We had that issue with about 20 that were really against it. Most just basically take the route that essentially, okay, now they're monitoring and controlling that sort of thing, we can't do it with them anymore, so we just don't bother and try and find other ways to maximize our margins, which they found quite useful using the system, and the bulk ordering function allows them to save a bit of margin there. Now it might not be as much as they were when they were doing things they shouldn't, but it still allows them to claw back a fair percentage of that.
Right, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much we today's presentation, Peter. It was brilliant, and I hope that, a lot of people have found that really useful. We have, as I said earlier, we've recorded this event, so if anybody really wants to listen again or obviously share it with their colleagues, it will be available on Just Style round about next week. We will be sending out a link so that you'll be able to do that quite easily. So any questions, you can see there's an email address on your screen to get in touch directly with Segura, and also you can visit their website to find out any more if you'd like to. Other than that, you're welcome to get in touch with me. Again, I'm Heather from Just Style, but hopefully you've had a lot of your questions answered today, and if you want to find out more, I'm sure Peter and his team will be happy to help.
Indeed we will.
So, thank you very much, and yes, we hope you've enjoyed it and have a fantastic day. And thanks again, Peter, and we'll hear from you again hopefully later in the year.